preparing the live stream to YouTube. So evidently Bianca's going to take us on YouTube, put us private, but then post that video into LinkedIn. I try not to think about how she's doing this. Oh, right. Oh, cool. All right, Bianca, I have muted myself on YouTube, so I don't hear myself talking. I assume that will work. And Bianca or Tobias, anything you want to tell me, just do it in the chat feature here in Zoom. Okay, so hopefully this all works. This is a first for me. I've never done this 3 technology swing before. I like your background, Tom. I can't do this from my office upstairs because the Wi-Fi signal for LinkedIn isn't strong enough. So I take over. We do this every day, which makes me quite happy. So evidently we are live. Excellent.
No, you got a nice background. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I'm not sure what I want you to move forward or something. I want to see what it says in full.
I love this. And evidently we're live, which is cool. So hi everybody. Good to know we're live. I'm with Tom. We're going to basically shoot the shit for the next 30 minutes. Y'all can just get used to it because I've been lucky enough to interview Tom before face-to-face last time up in New York. But with that, let's kick off, everyone. Great to see you here. Good morning. It's the 63rd episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. I'm Sam Maule. I'm 11 Best Managing Director in North America. I'll be your host for the morning show. Glad to have you all here. We're doing it a little bit differently today. Obviously broadcasting this on LinkedIn, but believe it or not, we're doing this via Zoom over to YouTube and then pumped into LinkedIn because we're a tech company. We can figure that out. Today, we are thrilled to have Tom Peters.
Statement if I've ever heard one.
Technology. So we're thrilled to have Tom Peters. This true story. First management book I ever bought was way back in the 80s. In Search of Excellence, I believe it came out in 1982, if I remember right. I was on a submarine in 1986 reading Tom's book as I was trying to learn about management. And actually, my navigator on the submarine is the one that recommended that to me, Tom. So that's a compliment. First in his class at Annapolis, second in his class at Harvard when he went to get his MBA. Actually, one of my mentors.
I made the most awful mistake in public recently. And for a kid who grew up 7 years from Annapolis, 7 miles from Annapolis, and was in the Navy for 4 years, I really wanted to shoot myself. It turns out I had a retired submarine captain in my audience. And I was saying something about submarines, and I used the term submariner. And this guy it's a submariner, you dumb effing. And I really, the only reason we're having this conversation is because the gun that I pointed at my head didn't have bullets. I was so terribly embarrassed.
Bubblehead's a good word for us. It's amazing how close we are. I do a virtual happy hour every Wednesday night with a small group of folks in banking and outside of there. And I've invited my one of my best friends who was a radioman on subs is coming to join us tonight. He actually was on Shark Tank with Cuban, believe it or not. He's done quite well for himself over the years. Jim's a great guy.
Let's talk about Cuban later. Cuban just said something I thought was terrific, and I got into a pissing match on Twitter about it.
I saw that where you talked about learning, never stop. Let's talk about that because I thought you're great on Twitter, by the way. Obviously, follow your Twitter account, but you did. You said that today. You said, you know what? You got to always keep learning. I mean, that concept of never stopping, right?
Yeah, I stole from Cuban. I mean, I found something of Cuban's, and Cuban said, there's a lot of shit going down, but instead of watching 75, 25 hours of reruns of The Wire, read a book, do something, make it a learning experience, and it was pragmatic. He said an awful lot of you are unemployed, and you're going to be applying for a job in a tighter job market than the one you left. And if I'm on the other side of the table from you, I'm going to say, well, what have you learned? And somebody shot back and they said, we have to take care of your family first and so on. I said, obviously, in my opinion, I support that 1,000%, but that does not mean that you can't read a book or take an online course. And the guy who shot back at me said, well, that's so expensive. And fortunately, somebody who knew more than I did chimed in and said, somebody from Africa chimed in and said, you can learn anything you want today online and I am making that comment to you from Africa. And, I could have Twitter kissed the guy.
Yeah. So everybody, obviously, I mean, if you don't know who Tom Peters is at this point, Google, I don't know what to tell you. Go on Amazon, type his name in, look at all the books. Go on YouTube, look at all the videos. What I love about Tom, we're talking, Lord, 40 years now. Sorry, Tom. 40 years worth of books, right? That I've read. And you look, I love Tom's office because if you look behind him, you see all those books. Here's the thing about Tom. You're an avid reader. Last time I talked to you was a couple of years ago in New York, but I asked you what you were doing and you said you took a pause. You actually took, I think you took a couple months just to catch up on technology and to read. What was that experience like for you? Because you said you needed to relearn, you needed to catch up.
Well, that's a dumb question.
It's a great question. I'm setting you up. Man.
I was slow athletically, but my mother had me reading by the age of 5, and she loved history. There were some orange covered hardbacks called the Landmark series. And it was James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, and so on. And so she made me a reader at the age of 5. And, I said, relative to that thing, and this is arrogant on one sense, but it may be close to true. I said, I've had a successful career. 98% of it is blind luck, but as to the other 2%, I said, I am not always the smartest guy in the room, but there are 7 billion people on the planet and nobody can out-prepare me. There's a wonderful one-liner that I, of course, can't remember, but it was an Abraham Lincoln line, and it went something like this. If you give me 7 hours to chop down a tree, I will spend the first 5 hours sharpening the axe.
Yep.
And I just, almost went into tears, when I read that, because I buy that so much. Anyway, and then I got to tell you one more, which, you in particular will appreciate. I was at dinner, and it was a private dinner, and I'm not going to tell you who it was, and it wasn't Warren Buffett, but it was kind of a top 15 planetary investment banker person. And I have no idea what the hell we were talking about, but I do remember he said to me, do you know what the number one failing big company chief executives are? And since I was born a smartass, I said, well, I can think of 50, but I'm not sure if I can narrow it down. And he didn't grin or smile or anything else. And he looked at me and he pointed at me and he said, they don't read enough.
Yeah.
And there is not a Buffett line, but there's a Charlie Munger. Munger's, that the right pronunciation? Number 2 guy at Berkshire Hathaway. There's a Munger line that said, you would not believe how much Warren and I read, and I have never run into a seriously successful person who is not a reading addict. And I buy that. And in my own case, which is totally irrelevant, is 17-minute TED Talks don't do a goddamn thing for
Amen.
me. My line has always been 17 minutes. You talk at 130 words a minute. That's 2,500 words. Give me the 2,500 word paper, please. And you can. And the other part of it is I love to speak, and I mean, it's just so stilted how we learn to do persuasively the hand movements, and it looks like shit. I think if I'm giving a speech, I'm picking my nose and pulling the nose hairs out. The secret of a great speech is making friends with the audience. And that's the other thing. Oh God, I was a host for a TED thing, a local TED thing, TEDx, or whatever the hell they call it. And we had 8 or 9 interesting people. And I said, well, this is cool. They'll each make their remarks, and then I'll ask them some questions. Oh, you don't do that on TED. There are no questions. I said, sorry, excuse my language. I'm fucking asking questions. And I ended up, which was great, getting a chance to talk to the guy who runs TED, who I know, who I had previously insulted. And I said, listen, I don't give a damn whether I do this thing or not, but I just want to tell you in advance, A, I'm doing questions, and B, the cameraman is leaving the camera on. And I did, because that's the point. It's an exchange. You and I have an exchange,
exactly.
For God's sakes. Listen, one thing about what we're doing right now, and this is really important relative to the people who are paying attention to us. You can Zoom with one of your colleagues And the reality is you and I have had fun together, but the reality is we don't know each other very well in terms of hours. You can have as much human interaction and emotion and subtlety of emotion looking at the screen. You know, I'd rather do it in the room, but right. You know, in the WFH stuff, you can be real as hell. And so I will not accept. Somebody sent me a tweet this morning and said, "How do you do MBWA? You know, managing by wandering around. How do you do it at a Zoom meeting?" And you know, I did give the right first answer. I said, "I don't care whether you're doing it in a room or doing it at Zoom. You know, first rule is don't be an asshole. You've got to want to. You've got to. I desperately want to communicate with you, Sam. It's life or death. This is what I do. I care about the ideas. I would die before I couldn't communicate. And that's the part of WFH. I don't give a damn what your technology is. You know, Daniel Goleman, I just invented this morning. Christ, it was good. Daniel Goleman gave us EQ, and I am now giving us, do you see it? Yeah.
I read it this morning and laughed.
GSQ is give a shitism. And you know who I stole that from? I stole it from a pal. He wrote some good management books named Barry Gibbons. He ran Burger King for quite a while, and did a brilliant turnaround 1,000 years ago. And Barry, there was a quote in one of his books who said, "I never had a vision for Burger King. I never had a mission statement for Burger King. What I wanted was 250,000 people, including the people at the serving window, all of whom gave a shit." And you know, I thought that was biblical in its power.
So your Twitter feed is one of those that I've got a routine that I check every day. So yeah, I saw that this morning. I started laughing. I saw the post about Cuban, and I saw that one. I love that one. Actually, the whole concept of giving a shit and getting shit done. That's T-shirts that we wear at 11FS, by the way, which makes me laugh. I do want to touch on something because I'm glad you went there about the fact that we're on Zoom, but you can still connect. You can express empathy, and you can find folks to connect to and give feedback to, because I remember talking to you before, and you've mentioned this in multiple talks, your mentors, those that impacted your life the most, and you can correct me if I get this wrong, your mother and your first commanding officer in Vietnam. Those two people just had a massive impact on your life. And so those are two real connections. Those are people that you know, that you spent time with, that you went through crises with. So from a crisis leadership standpoint, because we're living through bonkers times right now, bonkers times. I'm in my daughter's bedroom. I talk about this all the time. And it's my 18-year-old daughter about to go off to college. Well, now she's not going to go off to college. She's going to study at home, evidently. But she's at that 18-year-old point in her life, right? Where this is when it all happens. And she's had some points of depression, right? Because this is a kid that was born right after 9/11, has lived through 20 years of war, has lived through 2 economic collapses that never were supposed to happen, right? In our lifetime, is now going through this global pandemic and, you know, everything getting canceled on her. And she's had points where she's gotten down. And I've told her a couple things. Is one, read like crazy. Never stop reading. I've shared that love for her. I already told you the books that, you know, she's already reading. And then 2, really look and find those mentors in your life, right? Those people that inspire you and do that. I gave her 2 examples of that. I'd love to get your feedback. So when I look at leadership, everybody, I'm giving him a softball question. So he's about to go on a rant. When I look at global leadership, I love the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And you have ties to New Zealand. You teach in New Zealand. You spend parts of the year in New Zealand, right? You still do that?
Yeah. Well, the answer is yes. I do spend time in New Zealand, and I had another one of those tweets that said, "I will personally pay first-class fare for dearly beloved Jacinda to fly to the United States and move into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue."
My vote. I think she's one of the greatest leaders they have in the world right now. Personally,
well, you know, there's that thing, and I don't want to be quoted. He said, quoting himself, and you've seen the same thing, and maybe you can even correct me. By some measures, the 7 of the biggest countries that have had 7 significant countries that have had the least problem with COVID have one thing in common, and that is women as leaders. Amen. And that's even true of, you know, Angela Merkel, for heaven's sakes, who is not all about sweetness and love. She's PhD holder in some very obscure molecular chemistry,
like quantum physics or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
way out there. Brilliant. Yeah. So here's the argument I always get when I put the New Zealand Prime Minister up there as an example. They're like, yes, New Zealand, they have nobody. Folks, New Zealand has 5 million people. That's its population. There's only 10 states in the US that have a population above
Yes.
10 million. So take that bullshit and get rid of it. It's only 20 states that have more people in them. And we hold up governors all the time as examples.
This is incredible. I didn't need to bother to show up. That's exactly been my point, because, you know,
Thank you.
I've got a town near me with 100,000 people and it's having some problems. And I said the same thing. Hey,
yeah,
she's the chief head of government in a 5 million person operation. And I'm watching a head of government in 100,000 population who's screwing things up to a fairly well. So, you know, get over it.
Why? But you've been pushing this, the concept of leadership. Here's what I love. You've talked about women as leaders, and what a shitty job we've done, particularly in the U.S. when it comes to this. We're in the tech industry. We love to hero worship. Oh my God, we love to hero worship, right? We had the Wirecard fiasco here in the fintech space, where we had yet another CEO who loved to put on a black turtleneck and act like he was Steve Jobs. It was the German version of Elizabeth Holmes, and that whole debacle. What the hell is it with the tech bros and this industry hero worshiping people? It drives me absolutely batshit. You know, Elon Musk is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I think Elon is brilliant in what he's done in the multiple industries. He can also be a complete asshole, just flat out.
That's fine. And I hate keeping going back to Twitter on this, but there was somebody who did a tweet and they said the two greatest human beings alive today are blank and Elon Musk. And I said, listen, anybody who doesn't admire the things that Mr. Musk has accomplished is a fool.
Right.
But let me tell you that I admire him almost as much as I admire a truly committed 4th grade teacher who dramatically influences the life of 25 kids for 20 years in a row. And incidentally, relative to people who are watching us, who are leaders, an effective leader, between all your assignments, an effective leader can save so many more lives than the #1 neurosurgeon in the United States of America over a career. I mean, you really, and this is true relative to tech. This is true of somebody who's heading a 3-month project. You can literally flip the lives of 9 people on a 3-month project team, and that's I call it the highest human calling, the maximization of human potential. Listen, I have a favorite quote out of the thousands, and it comes from an Oscar Lifetime Achievement Award acceptance speech by Robert Altman, who was a director. And here's the beauty. The role of the director is to create a space where actors and actresses can become more than they have ever been before, more than they have ever dreamed of being. And that's Picasso. You find me your greatest piece of art, and that hangs right in there with it. That's what leadership is all about. That's what, and yeah, it is. Listen, here's another one. I don't know if you saw this or saw it from me or what have you. I'm really irritated that it wasn't around for my last book. It was an article that was somewhere or other. Google did a study of their top employees and their most innovative teams. There were 8 attributes associated with top employees. The first 7 were all soft skills, like listening, respecting the position of the other person, and literally on a list of 8, STEM came in last. And then they did, who are our most innovative teams? And Google is one of those totally misguided enterprises that classify people as A players and B players. I mean, it is a magic tool. How, with one sentence, can you demotivate 50% of the population? Not easy, but that'll do it. Anyway, so they had these teams that were B player teams and A player teams. The B player teams out innovated the A player teams, 10 to 1. And
Yeah.
again, it was the same stuff. I respected your point of view, and what I remember is again, 7 out of the 8 top attributes of the most innovative teams were soft attributes. And what I remember is they had the attributes of the bad guy teams, and I think this at least at some level touches on what you said. And one, something like number 1 or number 2 of the screw ups was no intellectual bullying. And, that's an awful lot of the part of that. For Christ's sakes, I lived in Silicon Valley for 25 years. And my 25 years were, now, boy, am I showing my age, the days of Bill and Dave, when, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard ran, HP and so on. And, I think even some of the people graduating in computer science at Stanford at the time were decent. But you get these kids, they have been totally spoiled by their parents. They have IQs of 320. That's low in their class, but the best that they can do. At 22, they get hired for $100,000 frigging dollars a year to write code from Google. And they know that they know more than any other living human being on earth. I mean, Christ, Zuckerberg is got to be model number 1 of that kind of crap. Incidentally, relative to ranking systems and the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I'm serious about this, there are 324 million Americans. The bottom 2 on that list for me are tied, and it's he whose name shall not be mentioned and Zuckerberg. I think Zuckerberg is a menace to human society. And, and everybody knows, because we've got technologists, who are watching us, but I'm sorry, I just have to say it again. Here is a guy who did a project that turned into a company based on stealing data to rank college girls on their looks. Fuck you, Mark.
And by the way, they just banned a hate group. Yeah, they banned the Boogaloos. They made a big deal about it. And by the way, they've been making ad revenue and fees off of them for years. So to politely reiterate what Tom said, my daughter's not watching this. Fuck off. Seriously, just fuck off.
Yeah. Well, my dadness, and you're a dad, and I'm not a dad, but I'm a stepdad, is these moms and dads produced extraordinarily bright kids, did everything, including many illegal things, to get their kid into MIT or Stanford. And he and his classmates are now spending their entire adult life designing algorithms that will, in fact, manipulate at the deepest level their fellow human beings in order to maximize the profit of Zuckerberg. I mean, that's what. I mean, listen. People always come back to me and say, there've always been ad agencies. This ain't just another ad agency. This is not a pretty girl in 1960 coming from Madison Avenue. This is. I've got to turn around. You will appreciate this. I just gave away 5 copies and bought my 6th.
This is what we do, everybody. By the way, I get all of my book recommendations from him. Persuasive Technology.
Yeah, this is that's interesting. It's persuasive technology using computers to change what we think and do, and that's not interesting. What's interesting is the name at the bottom. B.J. Fogg, F-O-O-G. Mr. Fogg is the one who trained the Google boys, and he is the father at Stanford University of this manipulative stuff. I mean, this book, I won't understand it, and I wouldn't read the damn thing even if I do, but it's like, this is, if there's a Bible, which I don't happen to have one of those, but if there's a Bible, this is the anti-Bible. Again, this is the handbook for screwing people's minds.
So I've got I got a shout out for you.
The only good news, as I understand it, is what those coders do at Google is absolute raw meat for AI within 10 years.
Amen. Amen. So I got a question here. It's from Siddhar. I'm not surprised at all. So Siddhar is a tech founder, lives in Silicon Valley. He is on this show Tom, you wouldn't believe this. We've done 63 of these. Siddhartha's been on all 63. He shows up and he always asks great questions. So one, Siddhartha said, I read In Search of Excellence in 1982 in Mumbai, India, and was so impressed with what you wrote, Tom, about HP that I wanted to work there, a goal I realized in 1988 in Cupertino. So thanks. So there you go. So here's your setup. And here's this question. If we defined a metric called management IQ that represented the societal state of management competence, has this metric advanced at all from 1982 when you wrote the original book?
I'm going to get up again. All right.
Yeah. I love this. No, interactive's so much better. This is making my day. We got a book coming, Siddhartha. This one's for you. He's going to go, don't you? And by the way, he's not there. Look at the pile of books, everybody. I fucking love it.
It's not a book.
All right.
It's a pile of books.
Oh, here we go. Okay, Siddhartha, for you.
I'm going to read you the title, which inadvertently will tie to the question. The first
Awesome.
one, which has gotten a lot of publicity, is called The Fuzzy, F-U-Z-Z-Y, The Fuzzy and the Techie, Why the Liberal Arts Degree Will Rule the Digital World. The second one, George Anders. The author, by the way, is Scott Hartley. George Anders, You Can Do Anything, The Surprising Power of a Quote Unquote Useless Liberal Arts Education. Number 3, called Sense Making by Christian Madsberg, if I'm pronouncing it right. Sense Making, The Power of the Humanities in the Age of the Algorithm. And the fourth one on the pile is David Epstein, Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. You know, two kinds of answers, and I'd like to get this come back because he can teach me on the second one. Two kinds of answers. First, it goes to those Google teams. What they found on those teams is very consistent with what we wrote about. I mean, here's what we found, and you know, since he worked in HP, so my co-author Bob Waterman and I go down to Hewlett Packard for our first set of interviews. They tell us about the HP way. They tell us about MBWA. And the guy who was taking us around, whose name was John Young, who was the president, wanders into the engineering space and he said, I want you to meet this guy. And so there is a young, fresh caught, barely shaving engineer sitting at a big fat terminal of the 1978 variety, which is when the research began. And there's this old fart bent half over and they're having this conversation. And so Young takes Bob and I over and he said, I hate to interrupt you guys because you look like you're doing something important. But he said, I wanted Tom to meet Bill Hewlett, you know, at which point I pooped my pants in public and made a big mess. But, you know, there was Hewlett and completely the most unassuming person on, I mean, let's also say, which our colleague would agree with, boy, did they fuck up that culture. I mean, that's a given. I'm not defending, you know, what they're up to today. But, and so, you know, what you and I just were talking about 15 minutes ago, a Zoom conference isn't worth a damn unless you can humanize it, unless you can make it clear that you care about people. And those are the variables. I mean, my belief, there's one of my favorite quotes from the last book is from a guy whose name is Roger Blank, which cannot be remembered. He heads a biotech firm, middle-sized, called Optinos, and he says, we only hire nice people. And he goes through this and that and the other, and he said, listen, here's the secret. There is some ungodly, sexy molecular biology degree, okay? He said, guess what? There are actually a lot of people who have that degree. Don't hire the assholes. And you know, and so it doesn't matter whether it's a housekeeper for a Hilton hotel or a sexy quant position at a biotech company. They're decent people around. And in his case, which is really, I loved it, is you're the CEO, you're Peter Miller. You're Peter Miller. I'm this MIT graduate, 2 years out. We start talking technology. You fall desperately in love with me. You would give your left and right arms to hand me an employment contract. Well, it doesn't work that way. because once our conversation is finished, I have to do, this is his term, not mine. I have to run the gauntlet, and I have to interview with about 15 people, and a couple of them will be researchers, but one of them will be in the finance department, age 28. Another one will be the receptionist, and any of those 15 people can in fact blackball me, and I will not get the job, even though you start crying when I get blackballed because you wanted me on the team so much. And so those EQ things, and I believe EQ for 100% of jobs, high EQ. And one thing in particular, listen, this is important to all people who have a little bit senior. 70, this is every damn country in the world with standard deviation of 0. 70 to 85% of employees are not engaged at work. The number one reason they are not engaged at work is not because they work for a dishonest company. It is because they don't like their boss. And you were in the Navy. The sergeants run the Army.
Yeah.
The chief petty officers run the Navy. Period. The first, and they're up a level if they're an E9 or something like that. But the most important person in the organization is the first line supervisor. Period. And the evidence is clear. They are most responsible for retention, engagement, quality, productivity, every measure that you can possibly name. And so if you want a great company, start with a great set of sergeants and chief petty officers, as it were. It's critical. You know, my half-assed one-liner is any idiot can be a vice president. To be a good frontline manager, leader, that's a different ballgame. And it is just an imperative. You know, and it's EQ, 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 and EQ does not mean low IQ. But even if it did at some level, to be a leader, I mean, it's wonderful. When I teach it in New Zealand, I have a couple of classes that are loaded with Asians. Many of them are Chinese, and they're kids who have these incredible engineering degrees, at least as good as my own. And they've shined, and now they're 27. And if you are halfway decent as an employee by age 24, or certainly 25 or 26 or 27, you will be a leader of something. You know, maybe it's a 5-person team, but the day you become a leader, the first 98% of your job is EQ and people management. And these kids, God bless them, have kind of woken up to the, let me tell you my personal example, which obviously you will appreciate more than most. So I'm 24 years old, middle of the night, I land in Da Nang, Vietnam. I have a bachelor's and master's in engineering from Cornell that, as far as we were concerned, MIT was okay, but second rate, but certainly one of the top 5 engineering schools in the world. Now, you know, again, to talk technicalities, which you will understand, the reality is the Chiefs run the battalion that I was in, 800 people. But legally, I am a sworn junior officer of the United States Navy. I am in charge of a group of 15 people, and legally speaking, I am responsible for their lives. And I did not have jack shit's worth of training. And in that dimension, I said to somebody, I could have redesigned the Verrazano Narrows Bridge with a blindfold on and both hands tied behind my back. What did I know about? I mean, the chief did it, but legally, that was my response. I came home the way the U.S. Navy Seabees, the construction guys, did it. We went over to Vietnam for 9. We came home for 3.5 and went back over for 9. When I came home, I went to Cornell, and I had loved my experience. I went to Cornell. I went into the Dean of Civil Engineering's office, kind of uninvited. And I said the things we're not allowed to say, of course, in this setting. I looked at him and I said, "You fucked me over. You sent me out of here as the best construction engineer with the most advanced technology known to humankind. And I did not know jack shit about leading people, and I will never forgive you as long as I live. And he was a lovely guy who I had liked an awful lot. And today, incidentally, this is my campaign. Engineering schools are awful at this. Med schools are awful at this. Business schools, God alone knows, shouldn't be allowed on the face of the earth. But they're all awful, and the kids are half to blame. I mean, it's one of my friends who taught at Stanford says, Tom, the hell am I going to do? They come here and the only damn courses they want are finance and marketing. You know, they think all the other stuff is beneath them, but the professional schools are awful. And I'm working with somebody who's the dean of the business school at the University of Cincinnati right now, a wonderful woman. And I mean, we're not going to get anywhere, but I really am pushing for this. It's those books. Add the humanities to the professional degrees, and it's Don Quixote. There's no question about that. But at least when I die, I'll feel good about having busted my pick, as the case may be. Sorry, you said it was going to be a rant, and I'm really sorry because
I love rant. But this is for everybody. David Garabino, you asked this. You said, why don't what is it about managers and leaders and executives and everything else? I'll just flat out say it. Tom summarized it well. I know we went over people. I'm wrapping up. This is me wrapping up. But Tom summarized it well. It's give a shit. And Tom actually used to do this. Remember, I used to write listen on your hand because you're like me. It's hard to be a good listener when you're full of passion because it just is. But having passion for what you do, right? If y'all don't think Tom doesn't still have passion for this after writing for 40 years, the fact that he just got up and ran around to find other books. Our producer went, oh my fucking God, this is the craziest interview you've done yet. I'm like, I know, I freaking love it. This is what you want, everybody. So I'm just going to flat out say, go to Amazon, go anywhere. Don't even go to Amazon. Go to your local bookstore. Buy his damn books. They're awesome. Follow Tom on Twitter. He's freaking hilarious, by the way. And he will say exactly what he feels, exactly like I will. And Tom, I know you and I could keep going for like 3 hours, but my producer's yelling at me. Thank you so much for joining, man. One of these days, we'll get back together in person. Thank God. And swap some even more. I have some good stories from the Navy I got to share with you that I cannot do, everybody, when it's recorded because my ass will get in trouble. Tom, lovely as always. Thanks, man. You have a great day. All right. Everyone else, thanks for the questions, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.